All right. Well, hey, good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're dialing in with us. Today is January 13th, 2022. Can't believe this is season 3, episode 49, and you are joining us on the Fly with Kai. And if you're live here today, we appreciate you. I know most of you watch it on replay, but I'm so excited to be able to introduce to you my guest today. I usually bring you some tips, tricks, and some hacks for the entrepreneur, things that I wish that I knew and people and resources that I wish that I had had. And today is really no different. I'm super excited. This gentleman has 30 years of IT in his background. I met him networking, which if you're not networking, let that be another big clue to you to be able to network. And I love the fact that, of course, you can see there, he is also a Star Wars obsessed IT guru and a technophile that really loves helping solopreneurs and small businesses, not only with their technology needs, but also with, of course, their security as well. And so please help me welcome Daniel Ford. How are you, sir? Unmute you 1 second. There we go.
Oh, I'm doing well. How you doing, Kai?
Good. I'm so excited to have you here. It's been just so fun. And this is, I think, a piece of most people's businesses that they just want to put their head in the sand and literally ignore it until something bad happens.
Yeah, very true. Very true. A lot of us do that. I mean, we tend to focus on what our business we want to get into, but we don't necessarily pay attention to what's around the background.
So how did you get interested in IT? Because that's definitely, not a regular track.
So the odd part is, out of high school, I never wanted to be in computers. I did not like computers. Yes. So I
Wow.
decided to go to college and get my engineering degree and became an electronic engineer. So funny part, a short little story. After I did the engineering stuff for a little while, after 7 years, the parts started getting more computerized, and then I started realizing that our company needed somebody who has computer experience, and that's when it started. I started my certification courses then, and just never looked back.
It's funny. I think we all kind of zigged when we should have zagged, and then we met our spouses or we met our careers, or, there's no coincidences. Things always seem to kind of work out like that. I know you started off in big companies. I think we both make our home in Silicon Valley, for those of you who are watching all over. And I think there's sort of like a rite of passage, like every Silicon Valley high tech worker has to do a stint at HP. That's just sort of the requirement. My husband, I mean, everybody has. And I think that's a good thing, right? Because it teaches you systems, but it also teaches you kind of maybe what you don't want. And I know that was a catalyst for you for being an entrepreneur. Tell everybody a little bit about that experience, because it's kind of true for a lot of folks.
Well, when I first started, my very first job was with Wise Computers, and I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember them, but Wise Computers. And then I did transition to HP for a few years, and then I worked at Cisco Systems as a senior system engineer for them. So my goal out of college or out of getting into this computer stuff was really, the cream of the crop job was working at Cisco Systems, and I got there. So I worked there for over 7 years when I realized it was time to leave.
And what was that? I mean, explain that for folks, because I think sometimes we wake up from, like the matrix, if you will, and realize, oh, is this all there is? And it doesn't happen for everybody. Some people love it. How did that transition for you to say, you know what, I'm done?
Yeah, for me, I was at Cisco during their biggest growth phase. So between 93 and 99 and 2000 actually, I actually worked at Cisco Systems. We were acquiring companies on average between 3 to 5 per month. So we were transitioning a lot of data and a lot of hardware from one company to the next. So the biggest thing for me was I was moving as Cisco was growing. I kept moving buildings. They kept moving our department to a different building in San Jose. So I must have moved in 7 years 9 times.
Wow.
And I just got tired of the cubicle life, doing the same kind of thing. I was really good at what I did, but it was time. It was just time to move on. I wanted to do something different.
I hear you. I think for me, it was I got fired and I'm like, oh, maybe there's something different out there for me. Maybe I don't have to go back. And so I think that's great. I know that a lot of companies out there and startups and stuff, they hire you when they've either had a whoops or they need an audit or things like that. What are some mistakes that you see these companies make with regards to technology and security and all that?
Usually when they first start out, the mistakes are that they don't tend to think it through, and it's not necessarily the entrepreneur's fault. It's really they don't know about it. So like a lot of startup companies will use Gmail addresses or Yahoo addresses or even AOL addresses as their business address. And these companies, they don't know how to do that side of it. How do I get a domain name? How do I actually get a business email address? And that's the stuff I help them out with. So with startups, I can answer all of their technical questions, not just email, but maybe they want to do a cloud hosted accounting system or something like that. So they don't know their options. So the purpose of me is to actually give them those options.
And it's better to like ask early because like it's hard to transition once you've got something established to, let's say you've made, like I have Yahoo for 20 years as my email address.
Me
And
too.
it's hard to switch it because you're like, I wish I would have done this early on because now it's a pain in the neck to be able to do that. So with regards to the business emails, why is that I mean, because I feel like some people don't care that I have a Yahoo and maybe some do. Why is that so important? That was the first thing you mentioned because I use Yahoo, so I'm just kind of curious. I've heard this now a few times just recently.
I have a Yahoo address as well, and I do purposely use it, but I use it for personal stuff. If I'm signing up for like a subscription, an email or a newsletter or something like that, I send it to my Yahoo address because my Yahoo address catches majority of the extra stuff, the spam and the other stuff that goes in there. So I don't really care that it goes to Yahoo. My business address is used strictly for business. So for my clients, for my vendors, for any other consulting that I do, is strictly for my business. But if somebody who says, give me your email address, or your local supermarket, you got to use your email address, I give them my Yahoo address. So there is a purpose for having a public IP or public email address. I just don't use it for business.
I understand. So I'm going to hire you to help me figure out how, because I do own kaideering.com. I just don't have an email address yet. So I'm going to grow up and finally 20 years later be a big girl and have a real email address. I think that'll be fun. You talked a little bit about cloud, and I think so it's funny that the more we chat about this, the more I realize, I'm in a similar space, but nowhere what you do. But I mean, a little bit. But they talk a lot about, cyber attacks and ransomware and cloud and security. I mean, it's overwhelming for people. So let's hit two things. Number one, let's talk about the data backup and protection of that information, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's never going to happen to me.
Right. Yeah, that's usually the way it goes. Nowadays, with the rise of ransomware, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So when it happens to you, are you protected? And do you know where your data is at? Do you know how long it'll take you to recover if you were to get hacked or were to get compromised? So those are the questions I can answer. The bigger thing about data protection is I do have clients that do not want their data in the cloud. They have that fear that if they have their data in the cloud, that somebody else could see it, get it, hack into it, whatever. And that's really not the case. Most of the data that's up in the cloud can be encrypted and is typically shared directly to the client. So I have clients that have data that is just replicated to the cloud, just so that they have a copy of it somewhere other than on site. I have clients that actually are still old school. They do not want their data out there. So they do local backups, whether it's to tape or to another hardware device or to a co-location facility that's in another state.
So they'll have like a physical,
exactly.
With a cable, and they got to remember to back it up every day, or it's on auto backup.
Yep.
Okay, so that leaves a good question. So someone like myself, I'm an Apple person. Are you an Apple person?
Sure, I'm both.
Okay. So when I get a new computer, all I do is just access the cloud. All my stuff's there and I'm good to go. Is that good enough for a small business owner?
It can be. The problem is that if you have direct access to your data, meaning that if you can open up Finder or you can open up Windows Explorer and you can actually see the data, actually save your data that way, that means your computer has direct access to that data. That means if I hacked your computer and launched ransomware on it, I could encrypt your data in the cloud, which means you could not access it. Yes. Wow. That's one of the things I educate people on. If you have a Dropbox or you have a Box account or you have a Google Drive, as long as you have direct access to it from your computer, I can actually encrypt it from your computer.
So then I couldn't get into it if I, wow. Okay. So now I'm scared to death.
Sorry.
This is so fun. Okay. So question on this then. So if you're like me, I'm using this iCloud, I get a new computer, I download it. What are some options for me then if you think that's not very safe?
So I always recommend people to have their data in more than one place.
Okay.
So that I get the concept of a lot of people will actually, oh, I'm going to move all my files to Dropbox and then I have nothing on my computer. So if somebody steals my computer, I'm fine because my data is in the cloud. That makes sense. The problem is the data in the cloud, depending on which subscription you're paying for, which you should confirm, whether or not that data is backed up. Because if you're using, like, say, the free version of Dropbox, you're allowed to store as many files up to, I think, 5 gigs into the cloud, but you have no protection, which means you're responsible for the data. If somebody happens to go on your computer and delete it all, you have no recovery. So that's just what I like to say. So make sure you have your data in 2 spots. So whether you have it on your computer and you back it up, say to Dropbox, or back it up to iCloud, then you have it in 2 spots. But I usually recommend at least 2 spots.
Okay, so let me just, this is for me because I'm being selfish, but I know there's a lot of people out there like I am. So I use the cloud, and you're saying that's good for the iCloud that comes with my computer. I paid $3 a month or something, and I can put it in there. And then you're saying also put it into Dropbox, for instance, pay like $100 a year for that subscription. Put all of that into Dropbox from time to time. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm saying is, if, say, on an Apple computer that you're storing your files on your computer or in iCloud, I'm saying back up those files somewhere else. It doesn't have to be Dropbox. It can be to a USB hard drive or a thumbstick, depending on how much data you got. But I just say back it up somewhere else. Just don't rely on one place for it to be.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that. And then I know, for instance, so that's a good thing to know. So back up twice, folks. That's what you need to do. We also talked, so the second thing we talked about, because the ransomware is up, 300% just over since the pandemic, and they're not going after the visas and the large companies because they know they've got full-time IT. They're going after the solopreneur, the, realtor that works from home, the financial advisor that works from home, because they're going to get pay dirt, right? And they don't have all of that stuff. So what are some names that we need of things like firewall, spyware? What are maybe the 5 or 6 things that we want to make sure we have to be able to protect if you're working from home on one computer, you're a solo person?
Well, when it comes to ransomware, the biggest thing protection is backup. So always have your data backed up. Whether you think it's overkill, doesn't matter. Just make sure you have it backed up. You have your files in more than one place, and you have it backed up. And you test your backups. Just make sure you sign up for a backup program, whether it's cloud-based or home-based, whichever, and the little wizard says that yes, it backed up all your files. You do not want to wait until you have to access that backup and find out it didn't work. So make sure you test your backup. And I actually recommend my people to test their backups at least once a quarter.
Okay.
So, and it's very simple. You delete one file that's not important, and then you try and restore that one file from your backup. If it works, then you know your backup is working.
Perfect. Now, what about these? Like, what should we have? Again, is it firewall? Tell us the 3 things that we need. Like, you need a firewall, you need a spyware, what are the couple 3 things that we need to make sure we have to conduct our business and make sure we're better protected? Of course, you can't protect it 100%.
Yeah, for the entrepreneur, for the home business, for a small business, less than 10 people, I say you got to have a decent firewall. If you're on Xfinity or if you're on whatever ISP that you're having, they do have a built-in firewall, which is good. If you're looking at expanding your network to have more than, say, 5 computers on that network, then I would probably look at something a little beefier that you can actually work in parallel with the Xfinity firewall or AT&T firewall, whichever. The other biggest thing to have is backup protection, and the biggest thing is some kind of protection for spyware. So I personally recommend Malwarebytes as the solution for both Mac and PC.
And what is it again? I'm going to put it in the chat.
Malwarebytes.
Malware, BYTE?
BYTES.
2 words?
Yes. So one word, malwarebytes.com.
Okay, I'm going to go to
Okay. Yeah. So I recommend Malwarebytes for both Mac and PC, and I recommend the premium version. So when you download it, there is a free version. Just know that if you buy the free version, that it only protects you when you run it. So in other words, it's only a scanner. So in other words, it'll scan your computer for any problems. It'll let you know if you have any problems, and it will quarantine or remove them. The problem is it doesn't have active scanning. So If you pay for the premium version, you have active scanning, which means that if you were to accidentally go to a wrong website, that it would protect you from that. If you had accidentally tried to launch a program on your computer, it will protect you from that. It will notify you that what's going on, and it actively scans your computer to keep it clean. Whether it's Malwarebytes, I mean, I just recommend some kind of protection. Malwarebytes is the one I recommend, but there's tons of them. I mean,
Great.
Bitdefender, SentinelOne, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, at least you have some kind of protection. If you have none, then that's a problem.
So what about password manager? So this is a little bit of a shameless plug for what I do. We do have ID Shield for Business that, and I never talk about my business, but it does, scan, for vulnerabilities up to 12 IP addresses, and then it gives you a password manager on our personal plans and things like that. What are your recommendations on that? We talked about some programs. I know you're not going to recommend one per se, or paper, or let's talk about, excuse me, password management, and what do you recommend?
So I have a lot of clients that, it's about convenience. So we all, go to our website, maybe our banking website or whatever, we log in with, Google Chrome or whatever, and it gives you that option, save password. That means it saves the password login information to that website in the browser itself in a file. I personally do not recommend any of my clients use any kind of browser password save programs, or even using a third-party program such as LastPass or RoboForm or one of those, because the fact that they still save all the information in a single file on the computer itself. So if I was wanting to run a virus, or I wanted to run a spyware program, I would say, well, I'm gonna get somebody to launch it on their program. I'm gonna go copy those files and take them and decrypt them, which means then I would have access to everything that you just put in there. So I'm a little old school that way, and a lot of my clients are the same way, that they tend to keep passwords protected by the old school of writing it on paper. I've had clients that say, well, I'm just going to make an Excel sheet. I'm just going to put all my passwords in there. Okay, well then, and what would you call the file? Passwords. Well, then that's a problem. So you just got to think it through. If I always tell people, just protect the passwords that mean the most to you, meaning that if it contains financial information, personal information, banking information, that kind of stuff, then protect those. If you're talking about your Yahoo email, doesn't really no big deal if somebody actually did hack your password, then that's probably not that big of a deal. But if I got into your brokerage account, or I got into your bank account or something like that, that's a problem. So another part of the password protection, I tell people, always use multi-factor authentication, whether it's two-form or some other kind of factor authentication. And that there too is another problem. If you log into, say, your bank, and it says, oh, I'm going to send you a code, and it sends you a code to your phone, and then you put that code in, there's sometimes a checkbox saying trust this computer, which means you don't do the two-factor authentication. Don't do that, because that you're just basically giving the computer permission to be able to not have to use two-factor authentication. I never trust the computers that I'm working on, even if it's mine. So I have to always have a two-factor authentication.
So people all the time use the same password for multiple things. So two things on that. One is the computer will recommend you one, right? You should use this Zoinks, address. Or they're going to say, oh, you use the same one. What do you recommend for that piece?
So passwords, there's no such thing as one password will work for everything, because we all know that some passwords require capital letters, some require symbols, some require numbers, and a combination of all of it. And it can be anywhere from 6 characters to 30 characters. So I personally have 37 passwords, and for me, it just works. But the biggest thing about passwords, don't use pet names. Don't use your spouse's name. Don't use anniversary dates. Don't use birth dates. Use something that means absolutely nothing tied to you. In fact, if you have to, I'm sure online there's password generators. But I recommend you come up with a password, or come up with a password for that site that absolutely means nothing.
Got it. And then multi-factor authentication, like I have that set up, and I think you should do that, especially on your social media, right?
Yes.
And then how do you know that you're on it? Like if you're banking and whatnot, how do you know that you've got that set up?
So if you log into your bank or you log into whatever site you're talking about, there is actually, if you go to the settings, typically in the settings and under your account, there is a way to turn on where you go to change password. Typically, there's going to be a line there that says use multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. I always recommend people to turn that on. Once you turn it on, it will automatically help you set that up.
Perfect. So we've talked now about emails, passwords, data protection, backup. Let's transition a little bit into compliance, because I think we talked that there's some issues that may occur that you don't even know. You create your own website. Maybe you've got your own system for handling credit cards. Let's address both of those for a small business owner.
Yeah, website is critical. So there's a couple things with websites that if you're, I know sometimes I'm personally right now going through a new web design for my website, and I got to make sure that it's ADA compliant, meaning that I didn't even know about this. What's ADA compliant for a website? Well, it has to use certain colors. It has to be a certain font. It has to be able to transition to a wider screen, because not all of us have the same exact screen, the same exact browser, the same exact settings. So it's got to be able to be manipulative to be able to open and close to a certain size. So that's stuff that the web people, the web designers, they're actually proficient at, and that's what I trust. So yes, you can actually go to, web.com or GoDaddy or one of them and create your own website, and little plugins and stuff like that works. It's great. But sometimes what will happen is that it'll break with ADA compliant people, because they'll have certain settings on their browsers so that they can see or hear certain things on the website, and it won't work. So you just kind of want to be aware that your website needs to be ADA compliant. You can always check with any web designer about how to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I try not to plug, but it's just so right here. We have lawsuit protection on our businesses and personals, and it's so worth it. I just had regular ADA compliant. Somebody walked in and used the restroom and sued them, and luckily they had the protection. But I recently had one do it for websites, and again, people don't even think about that, and so it's really important that you get that audited and make sure that it's correct, especially if you want to be grow and be a bigger business and have more of a footprint. People are looking for that. What about credit cards? Let's transition to that a little bit.
So with credit cards, I have clients that actually have credit cards stored. So what does that mean? So when you store credit cards for your customers, how are you storing them? There's compliance rules around it. So I have clients that actually have signature forms that their customers actually fill out, saying, okay, when you invoice me for my bill, you can automatically charge my credit card, and here's the information. It's a piece of paper. So the question is what is the company doing with those pieces of paper?
Yeah.
Are they stuck in a binder? Are they sitting on the accountant's desk? Are they locked up in a safe? How are they protected? So compliance there is that you really need to make sure that depending on your business, you really need to make sure you're meeting the compliance rules for your business model to protect your customers' data. Because if somebody was to get in there and steal that binder, they just got everybody's credit card numbers, and that's a problem. So
yeah. And again, I feel like I've never talked about my business. I just can't help it here right now, because that business ID Shield for Business will give them up to 100 grand if their information is stolen, because you're going to have to pay for identity theft protection programs because of red flag rules to those people who you lost their information to.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's smart to be smart on the front end. I do this work on the front end. Luckily, I don't have to do any of that as a,
Well, I can tell you that being a customer of Legal Shield, I can tell you right now that when I do my new website, I do have my lawyer review my website to make sure that I'm in compliance and that I'm legally protected on my website. And that's what I use them for.
You're so sweet. In the few minutes we have remaining, I'd like to transition, because I know we probably just scared the crud out of everybody. Transition a little bit into what makes you so successful, because, okay, now great, we've told you what to look out for as far as emails, compliance, right? Data, security, all that stuff. Let's transition a little bit to some soft things so we can let people relieve the pressure a little bit from all this. I know you're really good at a few things. You wouldn't be in business for 20 years if you weren't. And one of the things that you had mentioned that you're really good about is your time management. And I know that is a big problem for everybody that owns their own business, especially you're working at home and now it's in your living room and it's there. So what makes you special with regards to your time management, and what tips and tricks can you give people that are self-employed?
So for me, time management is very critical. I've always taken it very seriously, and that was even before I started my own company. It really has to deal with what I have to get done and when it has to be done. So I actually schedule everything in my calendar. I mean, everything personally, everything business wise. The reason being is if I work off a to-do list, it won't get done. If I tell myself that I have 2 weeks to do it, it will take me 2 weeks to do it. So I schedule everything, and that includes my leisure time. So I'm learning how to play golf. So I actually schedule that in my calendar on a certain day, a certain time, I'm playing golf. And that's just what I do. And it works the best for me. And because of that, my clients have understood that there is a schedule that I go by, and that's what I stick to.
So real quickly on that, is it electronic?
It is electronic.
Okay.
It's
And you
electronic.
can access it
It's
from your
in my
phone and
Yep, it's in my Outlook calendar. And
okay.
I have more than one calendar. One for work, one for pleasure, and a family calendar.
And then do you do you ever on that calendar, right? Do you put a to-do list anywhere, or you literally put a little space where it says for this 30 minutes, I'm going to work on this task, this task, this task? So that's
Yes,
kind of your to-do list?
exactly.
Interesting.
And because that I do that, and because I'm very diligent about that, I never miss anything.
That makes sense. I mean, you are very organized. So being organized, I think, is huge too.
Yes.
Self-employed. And then I know that you're really big, and I am too. Like I am constantly learning, and my profession doesn't have certifications like yours does. But I know for some other tips for some entrepreneurs here is just being a lifelong learner. Can you speak to that a little bit as well?
Yeah, for me, one of my purposes in life is to learn. I am 53 years old. I'm always a student of something. I've been in schools ever since I got out of high school. I mean, I have 4 bachelor's degrees, and I'm currently working on my MBA, which I'll complete in March. And then I'm already working on what am I going to do next. So for me, it's about education. It's about constantly learning, constantly, and I love to learn. And it doesn't have to necessarily be about computers. It can be about anything.
I agree. And you said you're working on your MBA, right?
I'm currently working on my MBA.
That's awesome. I'm a lifelong student. I like to read. I have a book club that we do. It's just, I built, for me, a lot of like my tip is just, I build in accountability. So if I know that I've got a book club that meets once a month, I'll get it done. I've got accountability for all kinds of things and a habit tracker and all kinds of things. Any other things that you can give, like a tip to be successful as an entrepreneur?
It's just about having the right people around you. So if you surround yourself with entrepreneurial types, then you will be successful at whatever it is that you do, because you have the capability of reaching out to other people to find out where their struggles were, and then you can learn from them. If you immerse yourself in networking like both of us do, we all have other people that we can rely on, hey, how did you do this, or how did you do that, or how do I get a domain name, or how do I get an email address, or how do I set up office cleaning in my office, that kind of stuff. It's because we network, we can actually pull from that knowledge, and it doesn't necessarily have to be ours at the moment.
I agree. Well, that was really well said. If somebody who said, "Oh man, I just watched this show and I'm like freaked out about all these things I need to do," how would they get in touch with you? I think you said your phone number would be the best. What's your phone number?
510-415-9700. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay, so I'm going to put that here into there. And for those of you that are watching on a replay, I can also pop that right up there for y'all. So you can reach out to Daniel there, and you can do business again all over, the planet, if you will. So it doesn't have to just be the Bay Area, because I know we both make our home in Silicon Valley, Northern California.
I have clients all over the country.
Great. So if you're watching this on replay on YouTube or where not, definitely reach out to him if you've got more questions. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was great conversation. We scared the pants off of folks, but I think it's better to be over-informed than under-informed. Don't you agree?
Agreed. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for another great show of On the Fly with Kai, where we come to you on Thursdays, every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, all time zones in between. And we bring to you trusted advisors, people that I know, people that I trust, that can tell you tips, tricks, and hacks for an entrepreneur that will hopefully help make you have smoother sailing in your business and your interactions. So we'll be back here next week for another great episode of On the Fly with Kai. Thanks again, Daniel. Take care, take charge, everybody. Have a great day.